Before we jump into today's episode, a quick note to say that open wide conversations are for interest only. We don't provide medical or clinical advice or legal or employee relations advice. Please do consult with a qualified healthcare professional if you have specific concerns related to your mental health or any medical conditions. Open Wide is recorded on the land of the Bunurong people. We acknowledge the richness and diversity of indigenous communities and the wisdom of storytelling that has been passed down from generation to generation. We pay our respects to elders past and present. Hi, I'm Natalie Phillips-Mason, and this is the Open Wired podcast. Through respectful curiosity, we have candid conversations that explore human diversity and how to create inclusive ecosystems for all minds, bodies, and identities. My guests are change makers who are doing the practical, often unglamorous work to make inclusion real. We are streaming on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. My guest today is Rochelle Courtenay, founder and the unstoppable force behind Sharethe Dignity. Sharethe Dignity is a national charity dedicated to ending period poverty in Australia. Rochelle, who is also known as Australia's Pad Lady, has spent the past 11 years working to change policies and outdated ideas that don't serve women and girls. She's also ignited a movement to change lives on a national scale. Sharethe Dignity aims to provide homeless and at-risk women nationally with sanitary products to allow them a sense of dignity at a time when they need it most. And I have for many years now had the privilege of meeting people around the world who are motivated to create equity and equality, whether that be in the workplace, in schools, in education systems, or in wider society. And Sharethe Dignity is an example of an organisation doing just that, but also addressing a topic that may be a little uncomfortable for many and certainly shouldn't be a taboo topic. So I'm thrilled to have time with Rochelle as my guest today. And just a quick mention that our conversation will mention homelessness, domestic violence, and indigenous health. Let's dive in. Rochelle, welcome, and it's really great to have you on Open Wired.
Thank you. I'm excited to have a chat.
Excellent. Your vision is for a world where period products are freely accessible and dignity isn't compromised by menstruation. Sharethe Dignity started in 2015, so I'm interested in what problem you saw and what was it about this particular societal issue, because there are plenty of them. What was it about this issue that resonated so strongly with you?
Oh, I wish I could fix all societal issues, right? But this is my lane, clearly. Look, in 2015, I read an article that was written online that talked about the fact that there were 48,000 women who didn't have somewhere safe to call home. And while we've seen homelessness and we know people don't have a home, what I read next changed me forever. And that was that they didn't have access to period products and that they couldn't afford them and were using newspaper and socks to deal with their period. And I thought, oh my God, I have never thought that was a problem for anyone. It was a real checkmate of privilege moment. I grew up in housing commission. My parents worked 2 jobs. They were not wealthy. They were basic income earners. There were 3 children. We never didn't have what we needed in the bathroom. We never didn't have a plate at the table, even though sometimes that plate might have been eggs on toast, right? We didn't ever go hungry. And I never thought that that was a privilege. So for me, it was reading that people didn't have access to period products was a double-edged sword for me. I had suffered severely with endometriosis. So I don't think Sharethe Dignity would exist if I didn't, because I bled so badly that I would need to have a pad, a tampon, a change of underwear at least 3 times throughout every month, a washing machine, a shower, a hot water bottle, Nurofen, chocolate. I needed that just to deal with my period. Now, I can't even imagine what that would feel like if you didn't. Now, when I first read that, I was shocked.
Well, particularly, I guess, in a country like Australia, which is not a third world country. So I don't know that many people would be aware that that would be an issue in a country that feels quite privileged.
Well, you know what? Periods don't stop when you're experiencing homelessness or having fled domestic violence. And it's not like we're giving a woman a warm jacket and it keeps her warm for years. This is a monthly problem that women never spoke about, right? So even if you were experiencing homelessness or extreme poverty or fled DV, people still didn't talk about it then, right? As a charity, it was a hard slog. It's still a hard slog. We have never been on primetime TV and talked about people not having access to period products. Never have we been on the Today Show to talk about that. I was invited on the Today Show when I got to speak about GST and the money component behind period products, but never about people not having access to them. Interesting, right?
Yeah, really interesting. And I would imagine for many women, it would be possibly quite shameful to be talking about that. And I'm just kind of speaking openly from what I might be feeling if that were me in that situation. It's a hard thing to talk to people about. Is that your experience?
Oh, absolutely. I had maybe before I was 25, before I could fall pregnant. So it took me a long time. It took me 5 years to fall pregnant. I used to be a sales rep for Puma. In order for me to drive from one town to another 3 hours away, and I wouldn't stop in a public toilet because I was so scared that I would have to sit on a towel to get to the next town. I never mentioned that to a girlfriend. I never mentioned it to a husband. I didn't mention it to anyone. That shame that sat at the cornerstone of periods existed for hundreds and hundreds of years for women, right? So imagine putting on a layer there that you don't have money to have a home for you or your family, that you don't have somewhere to keep someone safe. That whole poverty piece adds another layer of shame. It's a double whammy, right? When I first coined period poverty, people were like, oh, I've never heard that. I'm like, yeah, because no one wants to talk about it.
You mentioned that the size of the problem was when you first started was 48,000. Is that still the size of the problem?
No. So the problem is much greater than that. We hold a bloody big survey. So in 2021, we had 125,000 responses. It's the biggest body of data the world has ever seen on menstruation. The data told us that 1 in 4 women in Australia have been through period poverty, where they've not been able to afford period products, or they've made a period product last longer than they need to stretch them out. 52% of women felt like they were inadequately educated on menstruation and didn't know about it. 12% of girls that are aged between 8 and 10 who get their first period. It's no wonder they don't know what's going on, because we're not educating even when they get to the age, but we're not thinking about educating grades 4s, 5s and 6s on menstruation. So the Bloody Big Survey was the biggest eye-opener for us to see the enormity of the problem and to use that data to advocate for action. So in 2021, our data of 125,000 respondents, the main aim for me then was to find out how many girls were missing school. And so now in every state and territory in Australia, period products are available in every toilet in primary and secondary schools, excluding Tasmania and Northern Territory. And so we will continue to advocate. We've had some headlines that say, oh, we're going to spend $300,000 and make period products available. You know what? Period products have always been available at schools. You just have to go to the office and ask for them. Right?
Yes.
Nobody wants to do that. That's not menstrual equity. That's actually just the provision of period products, right? We have a podcast called Another Bloody Podcast, ironically. And we had a young girl on there who talked about growing up in the foster care system and that nobody told her about period products. Nobody bought her period products. And every time she got her period, and she suffered severely with endometriosis as well, she'd have to go to the office and they would give her one pad every time she went to the office. So she had to go back 4 times a day. How embarrassing is that? She said she would just stay home because it was easier for her to sit on a tea towel than to try to go to school and feel shame.
It's extraordinary, isn't it?
Gives me goosebumps to think. And so that's what I mean by that data has helped move that no girl should ever miss a day of education because their family can't afford period products. Period products should be accessible whenever you need to go to the toilet, not having to take the next step and go and ask an adult for them. Because most women as adults don't even want to go and ask somebody.
It's incredibly interesting. And I'm going to get to how Sharethe Dignity has evolved and how it's grown. But given that we're on the Bloody Big Survey, I also wanted to talk about some of the other significant changes that you've been able to effect. So let's start with Axe the Tax. Talk to us about that one.
In 2016, I was in a homelessness service and I was standing behind the counter, and this is one of those topics that I talk about. A woman came up to the counter and asked 2 men if she could get some period products in a homelessness service. And one guy said to the other, do you know where the period products are? And he goes, oh, yeah, they're upstairs. Anyway, and he comes down and goes, do you want pads or tampons? And I said, oh, my God, can you please just give them both to her? I would never have gone up to that counter and asked in a million years. Lo and behold, this woman would have been in her late 30s and everyone else behind her, maybe 30 men, playing pool on the computer, having breakfast. She was the only other woman in that room. She was so brave to do that. I would never have done it. I asked the manager why the period products that we gave them were not in the bathrooms. And she said, oh, look, we promised Kmart and Coles that we wouldn't put them out because the women were trying to take them back to the store and exchange them for food.
It's a whole other problem right there.
Something that you just don't think about, right? And that, again, a checkmate of privilege. All of these things are always just making you understand that you don't know the fights that you need to have for somebody else until you know the fights that they're having, right? When I asked her why they didn't just open them, and she said, oh, we can't. They fall under the Therapeutic Goods Association Act and we're not allowed to have them open. Anyway, in my trip back, this was in Melbourne, I was reading a magazine and there was a picture of a pink vending machine and I thought, oh, they can dispense them for free. Why don't I create that? So then I created the world's first Dignity vending machine that gave period products at the touch of a button for free. You didn't have to ask anybody. It took me 9 months to find me somebody who would make me a machine that would dispense them for free because every vending machine company was run by a man, but also they were there to make money, right? So I didn't want there to be a money component. And then I had a dream one night that these group of schoolgirls had pressed the button and all of the period products were empty and on the ground. So then I wanted the vending machine to have a timing mechanism on it so that you could only press a bespoke pack. So this is a bespoke pack. You couldn't exchange it at the shop. It was only for Sharethe Dignity to come out of that machine. So that took away all of the problems. So then we started to install those vending machines into homelessness services, into schools, into hospitals, into libraries.
At your cost? At the cost of Sharethe Dignity?
We got businesses to sponsor them and put their logo on the side of it, right? So at the beginning, we did that. What I was collecting was also data and understanding, right? So never data on why you've used it, just for example, every machine had telemetry in it. My biggest fear was that somebody would know to use that machine, but the machine was empty because nobody knew it was empty. No one had checked. So we actually now have 1,238 of those machines installed around Australia. And I can tell you this morning that there are 3 machines offline, which means that somebody's either unplugged it to charge their phone or the machine is out of stock. So my team have to follow that up.
Where are the vending machines located?
Homelessness services, domestic violence services, legal help. One's in a prison where visitors are not allowed to take anything in, but if they got their period, they'd also have no access. So it's actually not for the prisoners. It's actually for the visitors of those that are in the prison, right? We installed them in hospitals. We started to install them in schools until our advocacy took over, where we got the bloody big survey, and now every state and territory provides period products in schools. In Queensland, our vending machines are in every primary and secondary school.
Amazing.
But in Victoria, they copied our machine and rolled out 1,400 machines. We helped them frame what that looks like with Braille and everything, and the machine is very similar to ours. When other people saw that they could make money from it, other people have now come in to solve the world's problems, right?
Yeah, at the end of the day, let's hope people are actually getting the products.
And that they also monitor that they're never empty.
Yes.
It's one thing to put a machine there, but it's another thing to ensure that they're always full. Because if a woman who has flagged DV and she's got 100 things on her mind and she goes into the library because that's where the vending machine is or the dispenser is, that at least it's got stock in it.
Absolutely. So talk to us about Axe the Tax.
Yeah. So in putting together these packs, I thought that our volunteers, I could get this box printed, and I thought that the donations that you gave me, I could put pads and tampons into a box and then we could distribute them out with the machines. But I wasn't allowed to do that because they were deemed medical and they had to be done in a medical environment, which is great. But then we were being taxed like they were a luxury. So they were medical or they were a luxury. Which one were they? So then I went to a politics at the pub on a Thursday night. Malcolm Turnbull was our Prime Minister at that stage. I introduced myself and I said, my name is Rochelle Courtenay from Sharethe Dignity. Could you please explain to me why you think it's fair that our period products have got a luxury tax on them? And did you know that some people simply cannot afford them? What he said to me was there'll be no removal of any GST on any products. In actual fact, we'll be adding to GST onto other products. And I've heard no noise from anyone in the states and territories about this problem. They took the microphone off me before I could do anything. I went home in the biggest fit of rage. I typed a federal petition that night. That petition needed to have 100,000 signatures in 30 days. Never been done in Australia. We got 105,000 signatures. On our website, we also put a copy-paste email that everybody could copy and paste to send to their local councillor and to their local state and federal people, including one that we asked them to copy and paste to Minister Hunt. Somebody had got a hold of at the university that I was doing this, and they said, I've got these 10 university students in their final year of law who'd love to do some work on this. And I'm like, I didn't realize what they would be able to do, but the power of getting people to help you who are cleverer than you is always that's my superpower, right? If I was to say to anyone, what's my superpower? It's to surround myself with people who are much smarter than me in different areas, right? It's not saying that I'm not smart, but you can't be smart at everything. So this group of girls did a breakdown of what's happened all around the world, who's removed the vax or the taxes on period products, how were they bought in, what were the rules and regulations. Anyway, they came out with a 10-page document that I was able to read and to realize that from there that the Minister for Health had the ability to remove the GST without needing any state's agreements to remove the GST. I remember trying to get a meeting with the health minister and I couldn't. And I remember him ringing me. It was 6:00 at night and I talked to him for about 10 minutes. He had done some amazing work for women's health. And I said to him, I want you to understand that you as the health minister have the ability to remove this GST off these products because they fall under the Therapeutics Goods Association Act and you have been taxing them like they're a luxury and that is contradictory. And I'm going to tell you that if you don't remove it, then I'm going to file a class action lawsuit for Australian women to get their GST back from the last 20 years. The choice is yours because the girls at the university have said, this is your options. These are your options. So I knew what my options were. I only stood on the shoulders of thousands of women who'd signed change.org petitions over the years. But what they tried to do was a community piece that outraged women. People wanted to be heard. They just didn't take the political route, right? So I couldn't do what everyone else had done it before because it hadn't worked.
So is that around 30 million a year that we were paying to be able to have the privilege of using pads, tampons? Was that maternity
luxurious period
a luxury period pad? Excellent.
And you know what? Our children and our children's children will never believe that we paid GST on period products.
Well, I don't know that we would have even been aware of it.
Well, I didn't even know that I paid GST. The only reason I stumbled across it was because I was wanting to put together these packs myself, right? So I didn't know that there was GST. Who would have thought? That's, one of those pink taxes.
So then we've talked about the bloody big survey, which is amazing. There are two other pieces here that I wanted to get you to describe to us. And one is delivering thousands of free period products to remote Indigenous communities. So it's the Indigenous Menstrual Health program.
It's based on every woman everywhere should have access to period products, right? And it shouldn't be a postcode lottery as to whether menstrual equity is in your community or not. And period products in a remote Indigenous community can cost you $22.
Wow.
How does a mother who's got two daughters and herself menstruating every month even afford that?
Well, they don't.
They just wouldn't. So ensuring that period products get out to our remote communities, but ensuring even incontinence aids, they're just not out there and they're so expensive. I mean, incontinence aids will cost you $11 compared to $5 for period products in where I live, right? So imagine 1 in 8 of us suffer from incontinence. 1 in 8 women suffer from incontinence. You would have to imagine that number increases in remote Indigenous communities where there's not great healthcare and you're having babies either in your community or 3 hours away from home, right? Where you then don't go back to get help.
How has that collaboration and connection been made with Indigenous communities from people who are not part of the community? How has that program come together?
Let me just go back and explain to everybody who's listening. Sharethe Dignity do not give to that woman who's experiencing homelessness. We give to the charities who are already giving the wraparound services to the woman. We're helping the health services that wrap around their services, the other charities that are there, the schools. We work with a lot with the schools. We work with the police that are out in those communities, but mostly the health services to ensure that they have access to period products. So for us, we're not having to learn cultural ways because every community is different and that's how they manage that. What we do is put platforms, and if you go to our education hub, we have a 90-second non-verbal animation about menstruation that is being used in Africa. It's being used around the world. It can be used in remote Indigenous communities. It's used to teach new Australians what menstruation is and what products they can use and how they can't flush them down the toilet. We can give everything we can to education, but it's not our lane to swim in.
Cultural sensitivity is so critical to be able to implementing programs like this in a way that is not only sustainable, but that speaks to the women and the young girls of that community with their cultural identity in mind. So I think that's great.
But we also have education pieces on our website for what does a brother need to know when his sister's getting her period? What does a coach need to know? So if Ruby's dad's put his hand up to coach the under 14s, NRL or soccer, what does he need to know? Because I can tell you that probably 3% of men were educated about menstruation. How are they going to know? And they just don't want to look foolish, right? So we've given them all the information.
And it was something, I guess, when we first started the conversation around this kind of concept of taboo topic or causing discomfort. Have you seen a lot of that as you've been advocating and trying to make change?
I think discomfort comes from women over the age of 50. They're embarrassed, right? So we've been brought up to be embarrassed and shamed by our period. And so probably not 50, I'd probably even say 60, where like a lot of women were like, I don't want to openly talk about periods. That's okay. We're not asking you to share if you don't want to share, but should a woman who doesn't have access to period products need them and you can help by sharing your story or breaking? I mean, shame only exists where silence is, right?
Global Period Poverty Forum 2022. Tell us more.
Yeah, so in 2022, we held the world's first Global Period Poverty Forum. We had 46 leaders from around the world who were working in this space come out and bring everybody out. We had Zoom sponsor it. So more than 500, I think 570 people around the world watched it. It was about collaboration. It was about how do we all learn from what each other are doing? How do we look at, and I mean, that's where the wording menstrual equity came from. It was a group decision to not frame period poverty in a negative framework. How could we move past that to menstrual equity?
So I wanted to change tack just a little bit. I've interviewed a number of female founders over the years, and they've described a number of different challenges they faced as they built their organisation, as they built their brand. I wanted to know how you found, you mentioned that you were in sales beforehand, you had your own personal training, you're a personal trainer. This was quite a shift.
Well, it turned out better than I ever could imagine, just to say. But I will say that the first 5 years when I had my own personal training businesses and had to keep my own personal training businesses and had to do this job for 24 hours a day, both jobs, it was hard. I burnt out. I'm surprised I'm still here, but you do what you do. And I had to build the house, right? And I know it's a charity, but you had to look at it like a business. And if I didn't have a successful, sustainable business, I don't have a charity that can have impact over a long period of time. And I knew that we wouldn't fix it overnight.
No, it's a long game.
Yeah, it is a long game. So for me, I would always frame it like I was putting a foundation down, then I was building a room and I was putting a roof on and, oh my God, now we've got some walls inside, but keep the door shut to that room because I'm not ready to unpack that. I don't have enough staff. I don't have enough money. Even now, we still got some rooms with doors shut.
How large is the charity now? How many people do you have? And both working for you, but also on the volunteer side.
6,500 volunteers, 4,000 charities, 35 staff. We've got the biggest corporates on board, Bunnings, Woolworths, Priceline, Google, Apple, you name it, they help us now to amplify the voice. I feel like we will reach menstrual equity by 2031, if not 2033.
So what is that?
So menstrual equity to us is the utopia of Sharethe Dignity. It is where there are period products everywhere you can get toilet paper. There are no shame and stigma around menstruation, that everybody has been adequately educated, that should you work in your workplace, there are period products. Should you go to sport on a Saturday morning and you've picked up the wrong handbag to take your 5-year-old grandson to a footy game, there are period products in that bathroom. If you're in a hospital and you get your period, there is a pad there, right? That's not the case right now. And our measurement is the bloody big survey. So to give you an understanding, the survey has questions there that for me measure that 2031 outcome. Somebody said to me the other day, what happens if you don't get it? I said, no worries, I'll get it by 2033. What happens if you don't get it by then? I will get it by 2036. It's all measurable by the bloody big survey. I don't want any girl to ever miss a day of education because she doesn't have access to period products. That's my number one. That is now in every state and territory except for Northern Territory and Tassie. I'll get there, right? I will shame them to get there, to be honest, because it shouldn't be dependent on your postcode as to whether you can go to school if you've got your period and your family can't afford it. And Northern Territory and Tasmania are two of the most poverty-stricken areas of Australia. You know, that's just data. Getting period products in your workplace, it's now we have changed the bill that says, the policy that says workplaces should now provide period products in your workplace. By the time we get to 2030, I want that to be must. Sport, there will be no sport in Australia that doesn't get played that doesn't have period products in your training bag, that the coaches aren't trained with education. That's what menstrual equity looks like to me.
I think I mentioned this earlier. There's plenty of options when it comes to which kind of social justice or societal issue that people might want to focus on. But I guess I just wanted to put it in the context of the world today, and it is complex and it is overwhelming, and social justice takes on a whole lot of different forms. It can also be really divisive. Sharethe Dignity is not one of those examples. I think, that you'd find it hard pressed to come up with an argument as to why menstrual equity shouldn't be the norm.
We have a lot of men who say, why would we spend our money on that?
Okay.
And I say, would you like to have diarrhea and no toilet paper available in your bathroom?
And also, do those men have daughters?
Yeah, that's what I always say. Is this what you would want for your niece, your wife, your mother, your daughter? But you know what? One of the biggest mistakes I ever made, I didn't speak to men for the first 8 years of Sharethe Dignity's life. I spoke only to women because I thought that they're the only ones who would be empathetic to understanding what a woman would be going through. But I was so wrong. I was so wrong. There's not a man you or I both know who would want his daughter to go without period products. I just didn't know how to speak to them.
What advice do you give for younger generations, of all genders, who are looking for purpose and to make an impact in a meaningful way?
I feel like we're teaching our daughters and our daughters' daughters to look after themselves, to make sure that they keep their own money, to make sure that they have their superannuation, to walk away if it doesn't feel right. I got married because you dated somebody, you got a house, you got married, you had children, you did exactly what your mother did, right? Now people have choices. They have choices and they can use their voices. And I just say, your voice is the most powerful thing you've got for you and for others who don't feel like they have a voice at that time.
Are you staying firmly in the period lane? Is it something that you are thinking about doing more work in?
I mean, we spend more time out of menstruation than we do in menstruation in our life. In our next bloody big survey, we actually have got a list of perimenopause and menopausal questions. Sharethe Dignity is about more than just menstruation. As you know, we do It's in the Bag. And It's in the Bag is where we ask everyday Australians to fill a handbag with life's essentials, things like shampoo, conditioner, toothbrush, toothpaste, deodorant, soap, then period products. So whether they choose to put period products or incontinence products is up to them. We ask you to drop them into Bunnings in November. We then get them out to every woman spending Christmas in a domestic violence shelter or experiencing homelessness or extreme poverty. So that then carries us over and away from just if you're menstruating. For example, we do a teen bag. There are 28,000 youth in Australia who don't have somewhere safe to call home tonight. How do we make sure, one, they get a Christmas gift, but two, that they get something that they can actually use as well? We do a mum and bub bag for women who I can't even fathom or have enough time to tell you the amount of stories of the women who've received a mum and bub bag after fleeing DV and having a baby early and not having anything. And then we do a women's bag. But it is women over the age of 55 who is our highest growing cohort of women experiencing homelessness. And it'll be really interesting to see what our next census tells the story of.
How do people get involved with Sharethe Dignity if they would like to become involved?
Yeah, look, I say we can never have too many voices. So become a volunteer or share this podcast or share one of our posts, right? Because you will be surprised of how many people don't even know that this problem exists. The more people that know this problem exists, the more people can help us. So this podcast is coming out in August. Please head to Woolworths and buy a packet of period products and donate it. Please, if you're never going to do that, donate $5 because we'll get them for you. This August, our charities have requested over 200,000 period products. Now, it's a big ask. People are doing it tough with the price of fuel. They can't even afford to donate $5. So I'm asking people who can to please help. I heard a story in March about a woman who was using bread in her underwear in country Victoria because that's what the charity had given her because she was too embarrassed to ask for period products. She just wanted food.
Wow.
Head to our website and learn more.
Yeah, and we will include all of those details as part of the show notes. But really thank you for not just the time and for your generosity in coming and chatting, but in the work that you do and actually doing something about a problem that you saw. Because we all notice things and it's one thing to notice them and it's another thing to put your time, energy, cognitive energy, emotional energy into trying to solve an issue that is so very important. So thank you very much.
It's a privilege to do this work, to be honest. I feel like I'm the healthiest person in the world, healthiest and wealthiest, because my children and my grandchildren bring me great joy, but this work just fills my cup right up.
And purposeful work does. So,
and I'm not saying we don't have bad weeks and bad days, but today's a good day.
Well, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
If you found value in today's chat, the best way to support the podcast is to share it with a colleague. Make sure you hit follow or subscribe wherever you're listening. And I'm always eager to hear your takeaways. So do drop me a DM on Instagram at Inclusive Change or send me an email. All the links to connect with me and to learn more about today's guests are waiting for you in the episode description. Thanks again for being here and I'll catch you next time.